By now, they've become familiar talking points in this year's presidential campaign. Statements repeated so often they're simply accepted as fact. That the polls underestimate Donald Trump's support. That the polls have gotten it wrong more this year than past years. And that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have brought a lot of new voters into the election process. But just how accurate are those statements, which have become part of the campaign narrative? We're asking the director of the Marquette Law School poll, Charles Franklin. And I should say, as I always do, a colleague of mine over at the law school. Charles, good to have you back.
Good to be back.
So let's talk about this Trump phenomenon. You hear this a lot, that the polls simply aren't capturing Donald Trump's support, and that some polls, particularly live interviews, really underestimate it. Have we seen that?
Yeah, there has been some evidence of that, but it was primarily during the fall in 2015 and a little bit in early 16. In that period, live interviews, when the respondent's speaking to a human at the other end of the line, those polls were about anywhere from 3 to 5 points less favorable to Trump than automated polls where you're either speaking to a computer or punching a number in on your phone to show how you would vote. That difference, though, has largely disappeared during the primary season and now, so that we're seeing only a difference of between 1 and 2 points between automated and live interview. So it was a legitimate concern during the fall, but it does not appear to be very big now. Also, the automated and the live move in parallel with each other, so it's not like one's going in one direction and the other's going in a different direction.
You've also heard an awful lot of skepticism about the accuracy of the polls this year. You did an article recently for the Washington Post, and basically the headline was, "The polls are not broken." Say it again, the polls are not broken. What evidence is there that the polling is not broken?
Well, there are at least two pieces of it. One is if you look at the accuracy in predicting the outcomes of primary elections, where we could certainly see if they were broken, because we know a truth, we know the outcome. Right. The polls this year did a little bit better than they've done on average over the previous primary election since 2000. They got about 84% or 85% of the races correct versus an average of about 81. And if you take out Iowa, where a lot of polls got the wrong winner, Ted Cruz,
notoriously hard to poll,
a hard to poll place, then that average actually goes up to 91% correct this year. So if the argument is they're less accurate, we should have seen a drop in those numbers, not an accuracy somewhere between 84 and 91, which is what we actually saw.
And we should say you looked at a lot of polls from 2000 up until today.
That's right. That is practically every primary poll taken within 2 weeks of the election over that whole period of time.
The other thing that we've heard frequently in this campaign is that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are bringing all kinds of new voters into the political process for the first time. Do we see evidence of that?
There is some evidence of it in the sense that turnout was up in the Republican primaries this year. And certainly Sanders attracted a lot of young voters who had been too young to vote in the past or hadn't gotten involved. Here in Wisconsin, though, we asked in the Marquette poll if someone was voting for the first time. And the very substantial majority of those were first-time voters for Bernie Sanders. Only about 10% of the Republican primary said they hadn't voted before, and Trump did pick up some of those voters. But it does not look like a major wave, and to the extent that new voters in Wisconsin at least favored someone, they were more on the Sanders side. We also see evidence from the early primary states where we have actual voter lists, and we can look from that list to see who voted this time and if they had voted in the past, not how, but if. And there, the results show that somewhere between 8 and 10% of Republican primary voters had not previously voted either in primaries or in general elections. But that means 90 to 92% had voted in previous general elections in November, even if they hadn't voted in primaries. So if, as Republican primary voters, they were likely Republican voters in November, that doesn't suggest that they are a massive influx of new voters. Now, at the margin, yes, you'd like to get 8 to 10 new percent, but again, that's a fairly small fraction of the November electorate.
Yeah, and let's talk for just a couple of seconds here, Charles, about November. Could things change in terms of November and first-time voters?
Absolutely, of course they can. You can always see surges in turnout. And one of the great questions is, will this year be different from all previous elections? I think it's important to realize that in the past, as in 2012, where there was a lot of argument that the polls were not capturing Romney's support. The polls were incredibly accurate, getting 49 or 50 states correct. Therefore, take this with a grain of salt that there are theoretical arguments for why there's always the possibility of new people coming to the polls. We should be looking constantly for evidence of that in new registration numbers and in things that shift in the polls that we can see. That's always worth watching for.
Professor Charles Franklin is the director of the Marquette University Law School polls. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you.
Charles, thanks. And I'll be right back with some thoughts about voter ID in Wisconsin.